consultants, businessmen, managers, and also politicians, astronauts, health professionals, educators, or parents. What do these people have in common? From the US to Japan, throughout the world, and in 28 languages, to all these people, communication is at the heart of their lives. We strive to understand ourselves and others. The Process Communication Model brings powerful insights about personality dynamics and interaction. It has inspired and changed the lives of 1 million people as of today. Taïbi Kahler is its author.
I had met this wonderful man who is Dr. William Ellsworth Martin, head of the Child Development and Family Life, and he had offered me that I could have teaching and research assistantships which funded my studies. And so I got my master's in Child Development and Family Life at Purdue, and I started my doctorate. Pete was the head of psychiatry at a small private hospital, Wabash Valley Mental Hospital, right close to Purdue University. And I said, I heard about this transactional analysis and I'd like to learn more about it. And he said, first you become a patient and then you become trained in transactional analysis. And I enjoyed that process, learning a great deal of information and information about myself. During that time, Hedges Capers, who was a therapist and a friend to Eric Byrne, came from California and was the first person to bring this new theory of I'm okay, you're okay, ego states and transactions to the Midwest. And one of the most important, significant times of my life, and certainly the most significant man in my life, became Hedges Capers. I started to learn transactional analysis, and I started to co-train with Dr. Stuntz. And about 6 months to a year later, Pete said, I'm having Hedges come in and we're going to do a marathon. Back then, a marathon in clinical language was working from Friday night to Sunday night with very little sleep and perhaps a group of 15 or 20 people, all of them deciding that they would do some therapy. And so I said, okay, I'll send some of my patients. And I said, may I come as a patient? What I discovered was this was one of the most nurturing, permission-giving people in the whole world who helped change my life in that very marathon setting. Here's what happened. We worked very hard, and each one of us would present something, and Hedges was such a skilled therapist. And I sat and I still had some grief issues about my father dying in World War II. And so he asked me to imagine my father was there, and I talked to my father, and then I shifted and my father talked to me. It was very valuable for me. But here's what was most important of that meeting. Sunday evening, he said, everybody, you've done such wonderful work. And imagine now it's 5 years from now, and we're going to have a reunion. We're going to walk around and we're going to share what our life is like now. He was future pacing and giving permission. I held back and I didn't want to approach him, And I finally approached him, this man whom I had just met, but worked with in this setting. And I looked at him and I said, well, you know what I've been doing in the last 5 years because you hired me to work with you. And I have gotten into this thing, transactional analysis, and I've developed some things that are very important. And a part of me wanted to look and see, how's he going to respond? Is he going to laugh at me? Is he going to make a face? And what he said and what he did was this. He said, Taïbi, he said, yes, you have. You have helped change the life, and I'm so proud of you. I cannot tell you how important that was to me. Within 6 months, I had gotten my PhD. I had done my internship for the clinical residency at the hospital, and Hedges Capers called me and asked me to be the clinical director of his institute in California. It changed my life. From then on, he became a father figure.
Okay.
I worked 3 years in his institute, and then I started my own TA, Transactional Analysis Institute in San Diego. I was sitting around a swimming pool reading something. I was reading Eric Berne's TA in psychotherapy book, and in that book he talks about a Mrs. Sayers, and a Mrs. Sayers came into the therapy group, and she comes in and she does a few things, and she shows all of her distress behavior that he called a script and that we call a failure pattern. And then Eric Berne said in that book, someday a therapist will be able, a script theorist, someone will be able to identify a whole life pattern in a very short period of time. And I went, well, that's a challenge. Well, why can't I do that? Perhaps I can do that. Well, what the heck? And I then discovered drivers. I saw in the clinical practice at the hospital just before someone got into either distressed neurotic behavior, psychotic behavior, or personality level disorder behavior, they showed classic defense mechanisms that I call drivers. I've shown how we can look closely at Mrs. Sayers and the rest of us in a short period of time and know what the entire failure pattern or script is, how one gets into distress. No, darn it. He died in 1970, and my first conference to go to in transactional analysis was in 1971. So I missed it by this much.
How did you do your research? First on the drivers and the scripts. Did you film people? No?
The answer is yes, that was part of it. I got releases from patients so that I could film some of our therapy and training groups.
Yeah?
My hypothesis was that I did see these behavioral defense mechanisms, like doors leading down into distress.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, Eric Berne said, if you look closely at 5 behavioral clues, words, tones, gesture, posture, facial expressions, you will be able to determine where a person's current energy is. What I had done in transactional analysis about that time was I wrote an article on what Eric Berne called the ego states, the parent, the adult, and the child. No one had separated these and identified specific words, tones, gesture, posture, and facial expressions for each of the parent part and child part. I discovered that and developed that.
Okay.
So I could identify mutually exclusively a positive critical parent, a negative critical parent, a positive nurturing, a negative nurturing, an overdoing. So this led to my then moving from that discovery to, there's a sequence here. and the sequence has to do with these doorways. And so I went back to my little apartment, and on the wall, in good thinker fashion, I made my diagram: words, tones, gesture, posture, facial expressions. And I said, some people get perfectionistic. And I'd look at the video and I'd replay it, and just before I saw someone becoming critical, vengeful, or putting one down as a victim, I was able to identify one of these doorways through which they went. Some became perfectionistic and then critical. Some became over-adapted, wanting to please. And so...
How many videos did you watch like that? How did it come to your mind that there might be a pattern and you could recognize it?
I watched over a Thanksgiving holiday about 30 to 40 hours.
Okay.
And with that then and my own observations, I went, aha. And so then when I was convinced that there were just 5 of these drivers in total, and no other doorway would one go through behaviorally in order to get down to either doing this or this or this, then I thought, aha, time for research.
Okay.
And then I created a script checklist that had to do with lots of questions. I gave it to many people. I had a statistician at the university score it, and the interesting thing he said was, I don't know what you have, but it's clearly that it is very clear that there are 6 mutually exclusive correlational kinds of data here. And I went, okay. Now, I was both happy and disappointed. And so I kind of forgot about it. I thought, interesting, but not totally accurate. It was not until 1978 that I started to realize this thing called phase. And I thought, wait a minute. People have psychological needs, and I had strong correlations with what I called these psychological needs and different behaviors. When I discovered phase, I said, if people get these needs met positively, they don't go into stress. And there's a strong correlation here with trying to get the same need met negatively. My mother had kept everything I'd ever done. Oh, Lisa, she had a handprint of me as a kindergartner with stain there, and I made it on a piece of paper and plaster and paper, and she saved it all. Well, I called my mama Queenie, and I said, Queenie, do you have the results of my research? I kept everything that I did and she did in her attic. Well, when I looked at the data with this new idea of, maybe they're in a different phase. And so if I'm thinker or persister base, I will show the perfectionistic driver the most often. But my phase will determine something different. And so I went, oh my gosh. When I then formulated that and showed that it predicted behavior, that's when Dr. Terry McGuire called me and said, hi, I'm the psychiatrist at NASA. I've read your article and you appear to be able to predict behavior. He said, that would be very valuable in the selection process. In order to select the astronauts, it's a 2 to 3 hour interview by Terry.
Yeah.
When Terry and I first did the interviews together, he was so kind as to say that within 5 minutes I would put my pad down, and 3 hours later he said, you have more information in the 5 minutes than I got in 3 hours. How do you do it? I want to learn this. And so I I started telling him about process. It's the how and not the content. And then I worked with his psychiatric residents for many years.
Yeah.
And at that time, he said, of the 4,000 applicants who want to become astronauts, we keep giving them different kinds of tests and evaluations, and still 600 of them come for the one-to-one interview with Terry. He said, because what you do is observable, then it's logical. We know about that logical stuff. It's logical to assume that you can replicate this with a paper and pencil instrument. And I said, yes. So I took 2 years and validated a paper and pencil instrument, which has become the beginning one of the 45 questionnaire that we have now. And then Terry used the inventories from, 1982 and until he retired in 1996. Terry was the one to implement.
Okay.
And Terry was the one to facilitate the use of the inventory. The answer to your question, in essence, is for predictability of what they will do in distress and for compatibility with teams. And just 2 or 3 years ago, I got a delightful letter from Terry, handwritten, that says, Taïbi, I've been wanting to put this in writing for you, that I accurately predicted the distress sequences on 5 missions out of 5. And on the next one, the commander came back and said, your prediction would have been accurate if I had to stay one more day with that distress. So it's extraordinarily accurate in its predictability.
Okay.
That's what they wanted.
Sorry, that research, you did it independently from NASA?
I did the research independently at that time then, because I had my old data, and from then on until now, we have more than 30 dissertations worldwide that have been done on the model.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States alone, it's been taught in more than 30 universities and colleges.
Yeah. American organizations, American administration, CIA, FBI, have they used it, and which purposes?
You know, you're setting me up for such a wonderful punchline. I could tell you, but I'd have to.
Where's your lawyer? Did he come?
Here's what I can tell you that I know. In 1994, Joe Polly called me, and Joe was the training director there at CIA headquarters. And Joe said, I don't know what his official title was, but that was his job description. And Joe said, I've heard about this. Will you come and train a group of about 30 of us? And I said, yes. So I got clearance and trained. And Joe's got some nice stories about this, because he thought that they were doing it pretty darn well, and he was. And the upshot of that is that Joe retired a few years later, and he and Judy have headed our education division all these years, and just retired this year. And they single-handedly have launched the education, the process education model into university after university after university. So, to answer your question, I don't know about the FBI. I got one call one time regarding assessment of potential terrorists. My training sessions were with the CIA and then lasted for several months. And then I don't know what they did with it. In 1984, I got a call from Hillary Clinton, and she she was friends with a lawyer, a lady who helped me adopt my son Bo. And this lady lawyer told Hillary and Bill, who was governor at the time of Arkansas, that she knew someone perhaps who had valuable information about connecting with people and motivating and convincing people. And so Bill and Hillary and about 5 to 6 of their close friends came to a seminar, and I did a seminar for them for 3 days. And an interesting thing happened. Again, my goodness. We connected well, and what Bill was interested in finding out was why had he lost one election. His pollsters had said, you lost it to a certain population of this age to this age, and of course when he learned about process communication, it was so when I present with strong beliefs, I present with facts, and I'm action oriented, and I said and 30% of the population might want to hear things like, I feel your pain, or in my heart I feel the same way. They may want to see and hear and feel the compassionate part of you. And by the way, there's another 20% of the population who sure that might want to have a little fun from you and see that you can play.
Saxo and
yes, right on. And so the interesting thing that happened was that I did a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday seminar for them. And on Wednesday night, about close to midnight, I got a call. And I was surprised because I have an unlisted number. And, hi, this is Bill. And I was half asleep, and I said, Bill who? Oh, Lisa, goodness. It was Bill Clinton. And so he said, I said, gosh, Bill, what can I do? And he said, I have just gotten a threatening phone call and threatened the lives of Chelsea and Hillary and myself. Will you analyze the phone call and help the chief of security and the state, his security or the state police? And I said, sure. And so I got dressed, and they picked me up, and I went over and I listened, and I was some help in helping catch this person. Then from then on, we socialized. I was an advisor when he wanted to know about how he might interact a little differently with different communication things. I knew nothing about politics.
And did you write some speeches for him, or?
I did not. What I did do is I would receive speeches, and then we were hired by the Democratic Party in his first campaign, and the pollsters would call up 1,000 to 1,500 people. I don't know what the end, but my guess is about that number. We inserted 2 questions that would determine the base, 2 questions that would determine the phase of those called. And so then when Bill would write a speech, for example, I would then say, okay, that target audience, to connect with them, you might want to change the first half of the speech with a little bit more facts, a little less this, a little bit more this. And so we then looked at base, and as you know, how many words do we use for logic, how many for feeling, how many for reflection, how many for action, and how many for likes and dislikes. And so the pollster would give us the psychodemographic information. The second half of the speech would be to convince, and we would know how to convince because if we know someone's phase, we know how to motivate. Translated into speeches, that means convince. And for example, I might, with you, say, you are so logical and you think so clearly and your questions are so precise, and it is a blast doing this with you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
What the pollsters gave you, was that valuable information, research-wise, or?
Indirectly it was, yes, because I had not conceptualized and had thought as in-depth with how we could translate this into marketing and in sales. And so I started generating the sales seminars.
Okay, so that brought
Contact,
you
and because
business.
it was a, as we say in jargon, it was a slam dunk. Rapport in sales is connecting, talking the same language, and then convincing is if I know your face, I know what motivates you, I translate your features and benefits into perceived, targeted psychological benefits, and voila.
So what did you do for a living otherwise during all these years? Since the 78, 70?
Oh goodness. Trained a lot of people.
Yeah.
Went to lots of countries. And had some interesting business kinds of successes and euphemistically challenges. I knew, here's a psychologist who knows nothing about business, and a frame of reference of us psychologists is very simple. It has been historically, and that is, we don't go, hey, come here, I'll be your therapist. Instead, we just said, I'm here if you want to. And that was kind of a business frame of reference I had. I was approached by a wealthy businessman, and he invested in the company, and we decided that we would franchise this in the United States. And neither one of us knew anything about training. And what the mistake we made together was putting $500,000 into setting up different satellite branches of the company in different cities, hiring salespeople without the awareness that the sales cycle of going to a large company and then expecting them to buy a training product is a year and a half to 2 years. And so that means funding a lot of salaries and a lot of overhead, $100,000 a month for 2 years without the projected income. So it was a learning curve.
So it wasn't the right strategy.
It was not the right strategy. And then we then parted our ways. I repaid him his investment, and then I had a decision to make. Do I continue to attempt to retail this material, or do I wholesale it? And an interesting thing happened. This was 1986, and I was holding my 2 sons, Bo and Jason. And they were just 3 or 4 months old. And it was late at night, and I was rocking them because they were crying, and I was watching television. And I was watching infomercials. And I saw this man on an infomercial, and I assessed him as persister with strong values and beliefs, thinker, thinking very, very clearly, and promoter phase, action-oriented. He impressed me with a man who could have a value and know what to do with it. And at the very end of the commercial, he said, if you would like to, my fee is $500 an hour, and come to see me in Palm Springs, California. And I went, wow, $500 an hour in 1986. I thought, that's pretty steep, and okay, I need help. So I called him the next morning. His name was E. Joseph Cosman. And he said, stop with all the people who are on your salary. You need only 1 or 2 people on salary. Stop doing retail. You're not into retail. What you need are trainers and coaches and consultants who already have clients. They just will come to you. They'll discover that you can train them. They will discover that this tool can be one of their tools, probably will be their favorite tool, and you no longer retail. From now on, you wholesale. And I went, oh my gosh. He said, you lower your expenses and you reach people faster. I want to give one example, Lisa, of how clever this man was. He told me the following story. He went to Chicago to a convention. While he was in Chicago, there was a garbage strike. The people who pick up the trash would not pick it up. Well, interestingly, there along the beach of Lake Michigan at Chicago, it was a time that the alewife were coming in. They're very small fish, but there were so many of them, they would land on the beach. Garbage people wouldn't come and pick them up. It's summer, everybody wanted to go to the beach. And so people were arguing about this, and what are we going to do, and call the mayor. So he was reading the paper. He said, I read the paper every day, front to back. And he said, so I read about this. And then he said, I read that farmers don't have enough fertilizer. Now here's what he does. He goes to the public officials and he says, what will you pay me if I clean up all the alewife on the beaches? And they say, well, here's what we will pay you. Then he goes to the Farm Bureau and says, what will you pay me if I can give you more fertilizer that you need? He made millions of dollars in 3 days. Very clever fellow.
That's the guy you admired.
That's the fellow I admired. So I listened to him, and it changed my business considerably, my business model.
Were you in a promoter phase at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Looking for role models in the business.
Unconsciously, yes. Yes, you're right.
Now you've got incredible encounters also with Hollywood people. So how did that happen?
We were very fortunate in that one of our certifying master trainers, Nate Rieger, his partner, his ex-partner, Jeff King, is married to Rebecca Ames King. Rebecca is the sister of Susie Cameron, and Susie and Rebecca are now certified trainers, have started this marvelous Muse school, and Susie's husband is James Cameron. Absolutely brilliant man. I'm in awe of him personally and professionally. Joe and Judy Polly certified. Oh, I wish I could remember her name. Thank you. And she got the Academy Award for it.
Yeah.
So yes, we are connected. Oh, I believe that very soon there'll be PCM taught to perhaps writers and other people involved in the movies. The more consistent a character is, and wow, wouldn't PCM be just so perfect for that? The more then the audience would be connected to the movie. So we'll see. Huh?